Okay. Let's talk about it in terms of just to build on the idea. Let's say that you do the design, and that's just a project, right? And the design is something that you could hand to somebody and say, okay, here's the design. Now go hire a programmer to implement it. You know, you could. You ever thought about doing that, breaking it up in that way? It doesn't sound like anybody does.
No.
No. I always try to break things up into chunks, just because.
Usually usually your client's going to come with a concept, and if you're really lucky, the client's used a tool like Blueprint or one of these that gives you design concepts. But you as the programmer, you know, the design is fluid. There's going to be constant changes to it. I had an app once that was using all text fields and text boxes, and I explained to them that error checking is so much easier with a picker. So we used a picker wheel in place of those text fields. So it's all fluid.
Familiar.
Yeah, it does.
I do like to break things down, and maybe you know, as Sergey says, maybe they should be treated as milestones. But I like to talk about them as individual units. That way we can sprint from start to finish on the design, and we can sprint from start to finish on.
For example, you start a project with placeholder graphics, and you design the gameplay first. Then when you have the gameplay, you design user interface, the menus and other stuff. And when it's done, for example, my current project, long-term project, we have done the design, we have done the gameplay, but now we are making multiplayer stuff. So this is like another big step that needs to be completed.
Cool. All right, well, let's talk about working with clients in particular. So one of the questions here is, do you vet clients? If so, how? So vet meaning, do you screen them? Do you kind of interview them? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
As much as possible.
As much as possible.
Yeah, I think, and this is probably true for everybody on the panel here, we get a lot of emails, we get a lot of phone calls, and I'm very reluctant to take an app project from somebody that I don't know. I get a lot of students walking into my office going, I've got a great idea for an app. My first response is, great, buy my book and start developing it. But that's not always the case that they can do that. I encourage them to do it themselves, but that's not always possible.
You say that, and it sounds kind of funny, but I have actually had people come to me and say, I want to do X, Y, Z, and I know what goes into that process. And in order to figure out if they're serious, I will tell them, okay, then here's the first thing you need to do. And I will go and give them homework. And if they never come back to me with those pieces, the conversation is not started.
They weren't serious. And there's a lot of, I would say 50% of the app proposals that I receive, they've got a great idea, and they want to give me the idea, and I do all the work. And then they'll split the profit, and that's a no-go right there. It's like, no, if I'm doing all the work, I'm not taking 50%. I've got plenty of my own projects that I want to work on, not to make a project because you had an idea. Ideas are free.
I had a great idea, Brian.
Contracting, what do they call that? There's contracting for profit or contract. There's a term for it where people will actually take on a project. They do the agreements up front that this is your role, this is your risk, this is your reward, sort of thing, and then they go in and everybody comes together to try to make the project happen, and then you're supposed to the big payoffs at the end. And people who do that, they generally are after the bigger ticket items, and there's lots of contracts up front and stuff like that. But yeah, somebody just comes in and says, hey, I have an idea and we'll split it. No.
Working for share is really a bad idea.
Yes.
So only do it if the project you're included in is very interesting for you and you really see it's very good. But for me, I usually interview clients to be adequate, like if they really know what they're doing. I evaluate their idea if it's really worth doing it if it's not going to sunk in all other applications or other stuff. But the main point for a client to be working on if he pays or not, basically. How much money is it?
Well, and you want the project to be successful, right? So, like you say, like Brian was talking about at the beginning, you need as many details as possible because sometimes some people will say, "Well, give me a ballpark estimate." Well, I need lots of details in order to be able to get you a fairly accurate number.
Right. And there's websites that have that.
Yeah.
There's pricing websites out there on how much these apps should cost to develop, and you can send them to one of those links. And then you undercut that website.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other part of that, though, is like Ed was talking about, is that you've got to, you have to listen to what people are saying, and you have to know. How should I thought there? You have to know what you're getting into, right? So you ask as many questions as possible because you're really interviewing the client. You need to know, like Sergey was saying, where can you work with this person? Is their idea any good? I mean, are they serious? So I got to ask lots of questions and make sure that you can work with the client. I know Ed's talked about this before. Make sure that your personalities match up to, and then also just think of it as the project's. There's a responsibility there. Once you make it and maintain it, it's not just something that just goes away. I mean, Matt, I don't know how you guys feel about it. If you just do the project and then never see the client again. But I usually have follow-up work, maintaining whatever it is.
Well, and that's something that you need to hang on to is that follow-up work, because apps have to be updated. They have to be. There's going to be changes that need to be done, and if need be, you need to remind the client that if you want follow-up work.
And almost no client has a specific task to give you. It's almost every time something vague, and you have always to be a part of a designer. You're not just a programmer that just do what it was told to do. You're a developer. You develop with the client. You help out to design the application to go better. Yeah. So it's important.
Robert Kiyosaki wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and in the book he talks about listening to people's words, because a lot of times you can figure out where they're coming from, what their vantage point is, and you might be able to determine whether or not this is a project that you need to charge more or less for. You don't want to just figure up the hours and then multiply that by your rate and then figure out if that's what the cost of the project is. If a client is going to require a lot of hand-holding or a lot of, like Sergey was saying, a lot of education, you're going to have to fill them in on how things actually work versus how they think things work. Then that's going to require a whole extra level of effort on your part, and so you can figure that out a lot of times by listening to them in the initial conversation. So I know everybody here will cringe when somebody says, "Well, it's just fairly simple. I just want to do this one thing. It should be simple to do." And it's like, simple's a relative term.
If it's simple, why aren't you doing it?
Right. So yeah.
So get many such clients who go to me and say, "I want a really simple applications like $100. I will pay you. It's gonna take you like 30 minutes to make." And they give me ideas, and then we talk about it, and then we find out it's actually like a 2 weeks work job or something.
I'll give you $100 to do it.
Okay. Do you guys use contracts or anything with your clients? Do you have something formal that you use?
Yes.
I'm using website Odesk for work, and it has automatic contracts that are guaranteed by Odesk itself. So he's like a mediator.
Odesk is actually fantastic for communicating, and I've several people that I work with on Odesk, and I love it.
But if you do use Odesk, there's a cost.
There is a cost, yeah, but it's facilitating in a transaction, and, yeah. And I have had some people who I will meet through some sort of third-party service like that, and then they want to work outside of that structure, and then if we work successfully on an initial project together, then I have no problem doing that. But it's a great way to kind of keep a barrier between you and the client if you feel comfortable with that.
I'd like to say something back on the vetting.
Yeah.
question. So first of all, I vet all my clients, whether I know them personally or not. And the reason I do that is not because I don't trust people. It's because I don't trust projects. I need to get a handle on the project before I can say yes.